I'm on the phone with Aaron Walter, UX lead at MailChimp and author of Designing with Emotion. Aaron, good afternoon your time, and thanks for agreeing to the interview.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for taking the call. Listen, Aaron, you're a web professional, a consummate web professional. You've been around for a number of years, and you've written several books. The one that I'd like to hone in on today is you're Designing with Emotion. In fact, you have a session coming up, an emotional interface design session. Can we talk about that session, and then can we talk about the book?
Sure.
What's the session all about?
Yeah, I mean, I've been giving this talk that's essentially summing up some of the research I've been doing at MailChimp and with my colleagues. And the idea is that I kind of feel like we're at this point with communication on the web where it's just, this commodification of technology, and it's so easy for people to build new applications and build new services. And so the only thing that really separates our service from another service can be this personality or, this human experience. And because we're so accustomed to communicating with one another with a really honest human voice through Twitter and Facebook, we have a shifted view or perception of the expectations that we have from brands out there. So my new book, Designing for Emotion, and this talk are all about what it means to think about the psychology of emotion and how that relates to design and how we can connect with our audience in a very human way.
That's definitely important. What are some of the walkaways? What are some of the walkaways for web professionals? What can they start doing today to address some of these issues?
Well, kind of central to this whole idea of designing for motion is, letting yourself show in your work, and that's through loving what you do and the craft that we have of web design. But showing ourselves and showing our personality in our work is really important. And so I've been thinking about how to shape personality in design, and I created something called design personas. And I think that there are a few other designers that have been thinking about this stuff too. But a design persona basically just shapes the voice. It identifies the kind of the structure of a brand and the voice of a brand. It creates key traits of what this brand persona is and what it's not. So, for example, I created a design persona for MailChimp where I work, and one of the traits is, it's fun but not goofy, so that MailChimp, the brand, can be fun and crack jokes, but it's not goofy or cheesy. So I feel like saying who we are as a brand is important, but sometimes it's just as important to say who we aren't. And so when you start new projects, when you work on a new design, thinking about this brand persona from the very get-go is a pretty important thing, and that's something I talk about in the book.
Yeah, fascinating. Do you think that's a function of a designer or of somebody from Marcom?
I think that it is something. I mean, it kind of depends on who your team is made up of, but I do think that like a user experience designer needs to be thinking about this stuff, because UX people, they think about the big picture. They have kind of a T knowledge that the x-axis of the T, that top bar, is this broad understanding of a lot of different silos and disciplines of the web craft. But then they have deep understanding in specific areas about things like usability and design and so forth.
Yeah.
So someone that is a strategic thinker, someone who's involved in product design or web design from the very get-go, is the person that should be doing these design personas. And that might be a creative director, that might be a UX lead. It just kind of depends on the organization.
Yeah, I appreciate that. What creative pathway would one take to get into that particular specialty? I mean, obviously you're talking about a specialty, and what would you recommend somebody do to study for such a position?
Oh, that's a good question. It's really hard these days.
Let me frame it another way. How deep do you think a ordinary, well, not ordinary because web designers are extraordinary, but how deep should a web designer working for, whether in an enterprise or a small organization, how deep do you think they should drill into the user interface specialty?
I guess it kind of depends on the type of work you're doing, but I definitely think that web designers in general should have at least a cursory understanding of interaction design. So, you need to understand things like Fitts law, which is, a principle with a fancy name that just basically is saying that it's easier to click on a button if it's bigger and it's closer to the center of action. You need to understand basic usability principles. Because you can't really, you can't design in a vacuum. You have to keep your audience in mind and your user goals in mind, your business goals in mind. So I think that, I'm biased because I'm doing UX day in and day out and working with a really cool team of people, but I feel like UX is kind of the glue of what we're doing right now. What can make a difference between like an okay thing that we put out there, maybe it gets some customers, maybe it doesn't, and something that just people latch onto and love and want to tell everyone about on Twitter and Facebook and so forth. So I feel like, if you're a new, just getting started in web design, and maybe you're in a program or maybe you're an independent learner, either way, I think you really have to spend some time reading some books and reading some blogs about user experience, about usability testing, and just kind of understand, not forget, and always know that you are designing for people. We're trying to communicate with people, and so we have to understand people.
Yeah, that's a good point. So would it be fair to say that the emotional interface design environment really is something more apropos for the enterprise, or is this something that all web designers should try to accomplish for their customers?
It's for everybody.
Okay.
So that's one of the things I wanted to point out in my book was, I think that there are a lot of people, especially in enterprise space, that would be kind of skeptical about having some kind of collective personality and a very human voice and admitting that you're wrong and kind of talking like you might talk to someone if you met them in person, instead of, we all know what enterprise speak sounds like, and it's really annoying and kind of gross. So to jettison the whole like super buttoned up professional approach, I think is scary for a lot of people. And so in the book,
Appreciate that. No,
doing research for a long time, but I wanted to find numbers. I wanted to make it empirical and say emotional design doesn't matter what you're doing, but it boils down to return on investment and conversion rates, and you make more money. You don't need a marketing budget because you're just doing something that is so attractive to so many people. I think that emotional design should be on everyone's radar. And I know that we're all thinking about design right now because we just lost Steve Jobs and we're investigating his life, and we're sort of looking at the mark that he made on our industry and just on our daily lives. And if there's one thing that we see that's kind of this common thread, is like this care about craft, this really deep love and passion about craft that Steve Jobs had. And Apple they've always been really good about thinking about human emotion and its presence in the things that they make. There's that little light on the front of most Macs. It's not on the MacBook Air, but on MacBook Pros and Mac Pros. There's a little light that when your computer's asleep, it just gently pulses. And the rate at which that pulses is the same as our breathing rate at rest. And that is to communicate in a human language, to say, I'm a machine and I'm at rest, but it's doing it in a very human way that we don't necessarily have to recognize. It looks like it's breathing, like it's at rest, but it's our subconscious that feels that, and it has a calming effect on us too. And it's that type of attention to detail and thinking about end users that I think is so fascinating in what Apple has done. And I see so many other products and services out there that are thinking about emotion and design, and it's such a differentiator in a marketplace.
What's the job market look like, in your point of view, for those that specialize in user interface design?
Well, I can tell you that the UX field is there are so many jobs out there, and there's just not enough people. Same with like mobile design; it's just huge. There's so many jobs for designers, for developers, really good engineers. And I feel like this is a lot of stuff that, if you're going to college, one of the best things you can do is get a liberal arts education, some kind of a creative arts education, and think about, just basically learning how to think critically about problems and think laterally to find connections in very strange places. That maybe you're reading a book about anthropology, and then you can find connections to design. There are a myriad of connections between topics like that, or math and some kind of data visualization stuff. But there are so many really good jobs out there, and I feel like a lot of people, if you're good at being an independent learner, you can pick up books, you can read stuff online, you can start experimenting on your own, and really kind of teach yourself and get yourself started. But man, right now, like, my son is 17 months old, so he's far too young for me to direct him into this industry. But if I were 18 or 19, I would be so excited to be going into the web industry, because there's fun stuff happening. People are building things that are having a real impact, a real influence on human history. And there are good jobs that are fun, that are challenging, that make a lot of money. And that's a heck of a combination. Usually, you find a job that you hate, but maybe it makes money, or you find a job you love, but it just doesn't pay anything. And the web is the best of both worlds. That it's such a cool time for people to be getting into our industry.